the names of Parapamesis, Emodus, and Emos 21, but the Macedonians call them Caucasus. On the west, the river Indus. The southern and eastern sides, which are much larger than the others, project towards the Atlantic Sea, and the figure of the country becomes rhomboidal. 22 each of the greater sides exceeding the opposite by 30 stadia. And this is the extent of the extremity, common to the eastern and southern coast, and which projects beyond the rest of that coast equally on the east and south. The western side, from the Caucasian mountains to the southern sea, is estimated at 13,000 stadia, along the river Indus to its mouth. Wherefore the eastern side opposite, with the addition of the 3,000 stadia of the promontory, will be 16,000 stadia in extent. This is both the smallest and greatest breadth of India. 23. The length is reckoned from west to east. The part of this extending as far as Palibhatra 24 we may describe more confidently, for it has been measured by Skinny 25 and is a royal road of 10,000 stadia. The extent of the parts beyond depends upon conjecture derived from the ascent of vessels from the sea by the Ganges to Palibhatra. This may be estimated at 6,000 stadia. The whole, on the shortest computation, will amount to 16,000 stadia, according to Eratosthenes, who says that he took it from the register of the Staphne. 26, which was received as authentic, and Megasthenes agrees with him. But Patricle says that the sum of the whole is less by 1,000 stadia. If again we add to this distance the extent of the extremity which advances far towards the east, the greatest length of India will be 3,000 stadia. This length is reckoned from the mouths of the river Indus along the coast, in a line with the mouths to the above-mentioned extremity and its eastern limits. Here the people called Koniasi 27 live. From what has been said, we may perceive how the opinions of the other writers differ from one another. Tejas says that India is not less than the rest of Asia. Only Sicaris regards it as the third part of the habitable world. Nearchus says that it is a march of 4 months through the plain only. The computations of Megasthenes and Dimachus are more moderate, for they estimate the distance from the southern sea to Caucasus 28 at above 20,000 stadia. Dimachus says that in some places it exceeds 30,000 stadia. We have replied to these writers in the early part of this work. 29 at present. It is sufficient to say that these opinions are in favor of the writers who, in describing India, solicit indulgence if they do not advance anything with confidence. The whole of India is watered by rivers, some of which empty themselves into the two largest, the Indus and the Ganges. Others discharge themselves into the sea by their own mouths. But all of them have their sources in the Caucasus. At their commencement their course is towards the south. Some of them continue to flow in the same direction, particularly those which unite with the Indus. Others turn to the east, as the Ganges. This, the largest of the Indian rivers, descends from the mountainous country, and when it reaches the plains, turns to the east, then flowing past Palibhatra, a very large city, proceeds onwards to the sea in that quarter, and discharges its waters by a single mouth. The Indus falls into the southern sea, and empties itself by two mouths, encompassing the country called Patalena, which resembles the delta of Egypt. Aristobulus, however, says that rain and snow fall only on the mountains and the country immediately below them, and that the plains experience neither one nor the other, but are overflowed only by the rise of the waters of the rivers, that the mountains are covered with snow in the winter, that the rains set in at the commencement of spring, and continue to increase. That at the time of the blowing of the Etesian winds they pour down impetuously, without intermission, night and day till the rising of Arcturus 38, and that the rivers, filled by the melting of the snow and by the rains, irrigate the flat grounds. These things, he says, were observed by himself and by others on their journey into India from the Parapamicidae. This was after the setting of the Pleiades 39 and during their stay in the mountainous country in the territory of the Hippocaei, and in that of Asacanus during the winter. At the beginning of spring they descended into the plains to a large city called Taxila. 40 thence they proceeded to the Hydaspes and the country of Porus. During the winter they saw no rain, but only snow. The first rain which fell was at Taxila. After their descent to the Hydaspes and the conquest of Porus, their progress was eastwards to the Hippones, and thence again to the Hydaspes. At this time it rained continually, and particularly during the blowing of the Etesian winds, but at the rising of Arcturus the rain ceased. They remained at the Hydaspes while the ships were constructing, and began their voyage not many days before the setting of the Pleiades, and were occupied during the whole autumn, winter, and the ensuing spring and summer, in sailing down the river, and arrived at Patalena 41 about the rising of the Dog Star. 42 during the passage down the river, which lasted 10 months, they did not experience rain at any place, not even when the Etesian winds were at their height. When the rivers were full and the plains overflowed, the sea could not be navigated on account of the blowing of contrary winds, but no land breezes succeeded. Nearchus gives the same account, but does not agree with Aristobulus respecting the rains in summer, but says that the plains are watered by rain in the summer, and that they are without rain in winter. Both writers, however, speak of the rise of the rivers. Nearchus says that the men encamped upon the Aces in S43 were obliged to change their situation for another more elevated, and that this was at the time of the rise of the river, and of the summer solstice. Aristobulus gives even a measure of the height to which the river rises, namely, 40 cubits, of which 20 would fill the channel beyond its previous depth up to the margin, and the other 20 are the measure of the water when it overflows the plains. Pliny the Elder on the nations of India AD 77. But we come now to nations as to which there is a more general agreement among writers. Where the chain of Emodus 1 rises, the nations of India begin, which borders not only on the eastern sea, but on the southern as well, which we have already mentioned too as being called the Indian Ocean. That part which faces the east runs in a straight line a distance of 1,875 miles until it comes to a bend, at which the Indian Ocean begins. Here it takes a turn to the south, and continues to run in that direction a distance of 2,475 miles, according to Eratosthenes, as far as the river Indus. The boundary of India on the west point, many authors have represented the entire length of the Indian coast as being 40 days and night sail, and as being, from north to south, 2,850 miles. Agrippa states its length to be 3,300 miles, and its breadth, 2,300. Posidonius has given its measurement as lying from northeast to southeast, placing it opposite to Gaul, of which country he has given the measurement as lying from northwest to southwest, making the whole of India to lie due west of Gaul. Hence, as he has shown by undoubted proofs, India lying opposite to Gaul must be refreshed by the blowing of that wind, for and derive its salubrity therefrom. In this region, the appearance of the heavens is totally changed, and quite different is the rising of the stars. There are 2 summers in a year, and 2 harvests, while the winter intervenes between them during the time that the Etesian 5 winds are blowing. During our winter too, they enjoy light breezes, and their seas are navigable. In this country there are nations and cities which would be found to be quite innumerable, if a person should attempt to enumerate them. For it has been explored not only by the arms of Alexander the Great and of the kings who succeeded him, by Seleucus and Antiochus, who sailed round even to the Caspian and Hyrcanian Sea, and by Patroclus, 60th admiral of their fleet, but has been treated of by several other Greek writers who resided at the courts of Indian kings, such, for instance, as Megasthenes, and by Dionysius, who was sent thither by Philadelphus, expressly for the purpose, all of whom have enlarged upon the power and vast resources of these nations. Still, however, there is no possibility of being rigorously exact, so different are the accounts given, and often of a nature so incredible. The followers of Alexander the Great have stated in their writings that there were no less than 5,000 cities in that portion of India which they vanquished by force of arms, not one of which was smaller than that of Kas. 7 that its nations were 8 in number, that India forms 1/3 of the whole earth, and that its populations are innumerable, a thing which is certainly far from improbable, seeing that the Indians are nearly the only race of people who have never migrated from their own territories. From the time of Father Liber VIII to that of Alexander the Great, 153 kings of India are reckoned, extending over a period of 6,451 years and 3 months. The vast extent of their rivers is quite marvelous. It is stated that on no one day did Alexander the Great sail less than 600 stadia 9 on the Indus, and still was unable to reach its mouth in less than 5 months and some few days. And yet it is a well-known fact that this river is not so large as the Ganges. 10 Seneca, one of our fellow countrymen, who has written a treatise 11 upon the subject of India, has given its rivers as 65 in number, and its nations as 118. The difficulty too would be quite as great if we were to attempt to enumerate its mountains. The chains of Emmaus, of Emydus, of Peloponnesus, and of Caucasus are all connected, the one with the other. And from their foot, the country of India runs down in the form of a vast plain, bearing a very considerable resemblance to that of Egypt.